For centuries, humans have been growing alongside our botanical brethren. Our histories have mixed and mingled to bring us modern medical marvels, faded folklore, and everything in between. Of course, in order to understand the plant, we have to start with its roots. I'm M. Grubner-Gaddis, and this is Rooted. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Rooted, where this week we're talking about a creepy little weed known for kisses and kills, mistletoe. While there are many different varieties of mistletoe native to different regions of the world, most of them are very similar, so today we're just going to mostly focus generally in terms of science, but specifically on European mistletoe for both folklore and pop culture. Viscum album, or European mistletoe, is part of the sandalwood or Santalaceae family. Much like its other famous family members, mistletoe is an obligate hemiparasitic plant. In non-botany terms, this means that they tap into a host plant for most of their food and water needs, but they are able to also produce just a little bit of their own. Kind of like that friend who works for a few hours a week at a really pretentious coffee shop, and then spends like the rest of their time couch surfing and complaining about the kind of milk you buy for their lattes. As you might have guessed, mistletoe isn't something that you're going to stumble upon in most plant nurseries, but you might just find them in your next walk in the woods. To spot them, you'll want to look up, as mistletoe tends to settle into the spots where it gets plenty of light right in the middle of a canopy. You'll be looking for a viney plant with dark green oblong leaves and little red or white berries. And you'll know it when you see it because it looks ever so slightly out of place, but not in a poison ivy way. As far as growth goes, mistletoe seeds are actually dispersed into the air, where they then settle into nearby nooks and crannies in trees. When the seeds start, they're actually entirely self-reliant, but as they grow, they develop what's known as a haustorium, and you can think of this sort of like fangs, but it's really a specific root structure that grows under the bark of trees, and it kind of just burrows in until it reaches the conductive tissues, and that's where it starts really sucking up its supper, because the way trees work, essentially they have these tissues that are kind of like veins, and leaves produce sugars, and those leaves then send the sugar kind of down the tree into that connective tissue to the root, where it goes into storage. And then in the winter, it kind of hangs out in storage, and in the spring, when the tree needs to start making new leaves, it will send all of those sugars right back up. So that's why, like, right around this time, people are starting to tap their maple trees, and that's because they're kind of anticipating that they're going to start sending sap soon. And so, essentially what mistletoe is doing is it's kind of sticking itself up there and just drinking that syrup directly. And once mistletoe gets established, they grow up to get as much light and free snacks as they possibly can. And while a lot of them will stay nestled towards the middle of the tree, some of them are so prolific that they can actually choke out an entire canopy, which makes it a very interesting ID puzzle for naturalists who will look at that tree and say, like, I truly can't tell you what that is because the bark does not match the leaves. It is a crazy thing to see. There are some trees like that in New Mexico, and it's really wild. And while mistletoe is something that we think about a lot this time of year, historically speaking, it's often been forgotten and overlooked. Going back to Nordic folklore, mistletoe was such a minor player that Freya completely forgot about it. According to legend, when Balder was born, Freya went across the land making all the flora and fauna swear they would never do harm to her son. In her mind, she was just kind of securing her son's immortality for all time. However, as fate would have it, she skipped right over mistletoe, potentially figuring that it just kind of wouldn't be able to do much damage, or maybe just completely forgetting about it entirely. But for years, that really didn't matter, until eventually Balder made an enemy in Loki, who found out that mistletoe hadn't sworn an oath, and decided he would use that to his advantage. He fashioned an arrow out of mistletoe, striking and killing Balder, and royally pissing off Freya. Eventually, though, they were able to mend their relationship and find peace, leading to mistletoe becoming a symbol of forgiveness. Weirdly enough, this story is also one of the origin stories that brought us the tradition of kissing under mistletoe. According to the story, the British working class kind of latched on to the whole token of peace thing, and then weaponized that by lightly hazing everyone into accepting that turning down a kiss under mistletoe was akin to turning away peace. So it's kind of like how pirates agreed to gaslight everyone into believing in dragons, but longer lasting and maybe a little bit more problematic at times. The other theory on that is that mistletoe was often used in Roman and Greek weddings, especially during this season of celebrations. And speaking of Roman traditions, mistletoe also played a pretty significant role in the story of Anchises, a man who was looking to find a safe place to call home for his community after Troy got absolutely ripped to shreds. According to legend, Anchises visits Apollo to seek help getting to the underworld in order to consult with his since-passed father. Apollo sends him on, honestly, an absolute goose chase, explaining he will need to find and bury a well-loved musician, then collect a golden bough from the forest near the grave, a bough of mistletoe as it happened, and then take that to the queen of the underworld. Knowing it would be difficult, Venus gave our guide 2 doves to help him spot the bough, which he managed to find and snip just before the funeral, allowing him to hitch a ride with Charon across the Stygian River. And once across, they slid a piece of drugged-up cake to Cerberus, the 3-headed dog. And then, once they get past him, they sneak through the layers of hell, essentially going from the layer of super wicked to morally just okay. And once they get through that, as unscathed as honestly anyone really could, they end up getting to the green rolling pastures where honestly pretty decent people go, just like his dad. After that, they have a little chat. Anchises gets a glimpse of what the future will look like, and spoiler alert, it's the literal Roman Empire, and he goes on his merry little way. In medicine, mistletoe used to be used in all kinds of things. A cold, a flu, a cough, worms, you got it, you name it. If you were sick in the winter, you probably would have been given some kind of mistletoe tincture. And in modern times, we obviously lean a lot less on mistletoe for our everyday ailments, but it is still sometimes used in cancer treatment as both an alternative and in addition to chemotherapy. Now, this is a lot more common in the EU, where patients with different kinds of cancer, specifically like breast cancer, colorectal cancer, and a few others, are typically prescribed mistletoe extract as an additional layer of treatment alongside chemotherapy. In the US, we really don't see this as much, and we tend to kind of see more of a one or the other scenario, where mistletoe extract is being seen very much as an alternative and maybe like quote-unquote crunchy option instead of chemotherapy. And while mistletoe extract has been widely studied, the results are a bit mixed when it comes to its effectiveness. While some patients in cancers respond very well to mistletoe, with cancer cell death increasing rapidly, others see little to no improvement. And from what I can tell, we still don't really know what makes it that way. But what we do know is that mistletoe works in a way that's honestly very similar to chemotherapy, causing rapid cell death. It also stimulates the immune response and helps to prevent cells from moving or spreading across the body. And this is because mistletoe contains the active chemical lithins and viscotoxins, which help to specifically stimulate the maturation of dendritic cells, and dendritic cells can kind of be seen as the ringleaders of your immune response. They're the cells that communicate and orchestrate how the immune system reacts. So tumor cells actually work to specifically target dendritic cells and suppress them, making it easier for them to slip through undetected and even harder to get rid of once they start taking up space in the body. So in essence, mistletoe extract works to give effective directions to the immune system so that it can more effectively target cancer cells and kill them. Interestingly, studies have also found that the holistic mistletoe extract versus just those 2 isolated compounds seems to be most effective, but again, we're not entirely sure why. And of course, most of us are familiar with mistletoe as a holiday decoration, and honestly, this is mostly just practical. Because mistletoe is an evergreen that has berries that retain their color through winter, this is a very visible symbol of life and abundance in the very dark and dreary days of winter, and it's easy to come by, and because it's honestly kind of a parasite, nobody really minds that it's being taken. It's totally fine. Next time you see it, I hope you'll take a second to say hello, give someone a consensual smooch if you feel so called, and take a moment to be glad you're not traipsing through hell. That's all I've got for this week, but I'll be back next week with even more planty fun facts for you. See you then. Until next time, be kind to yourselves, be kind to the earth, and just like a plant, drink your water. If you liked the show, please subscribe and consider leaving us a review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere else you listen. You can also find us on Facebook and Instagram at rooted.pod. We're finally updating regularly on YouTube at rooted.podcast, and you can check out our website, rootedpod.com, for transcripts, updates, merch, and so much more. The show is written, produced, and hosted by me. I'm Grebner Gaddis, edited by Kat Friend of Friend Diagram, and our theme music was written and produced by Eric Cluxon. Rooted is a Henbane Media LLC production.